Dragon Con is a B&M sit-down coaster located at PortAventura World in Spain. It's very similar to rides like Wildfire at Salvador City or Kumba, just some other sit-downs. I'd especially draw a comparison to Kumba. It has a very similar layout as that, and especially as well as some other B&M loopers. But while Kumba left me somewhat disappointed, Dragon Con certainly packed the intensity that I was looking for in Kumba. This is one of the most underrated rides I have ever ridden, and I really love it. It stands 148 feet tall, reaches 65 miles an hour, and features 8 inversions. That's actually the most on any B&M. So as a result, it gets overshadowed a lot by Shambhala, which is about 100 feet taller than it and sits right next door. But I feel like Dragon Con can certainly hold its own against the much larger B&M. Both of them are very different ride experiences, but they both provide different sensations that complement each other really well. Where Shambhala brings the airtime, Dragon Con brings the intensity, and I feel like it has a lot of it. So Dragon Con is located in the China section near the back of PortAventura, right next to Shambhala. I mentioned this in the Shambhala review, but the two coasters together make an absolutely amazing skyline. The queues basically switchbacks like most other coasters at PortAventura, but it's got a really cool plaza with a nice entrance sign, these two dragons wrapping around poles, and there's a few dragon heads in the queue. But overall, it's pretty basic. There is no single rider for Dragon Con. Like most other coasters at PortAventura, Shambhala has it, Red Force has it, but other than that, Dragon Con does not. The fast lane entrance is kind of out of the way. If you're looking at the entrance from the plaza, it's down to the right. It utilizes the typical B&M sit-down trains for across 8 rows, the same kind of setup that they have for most of their loopers, inverts, floorlesses. You know the drill, it's an over-the-shoulder train, you buckle it in with the seatbelt. Getting into the layout, you take a right-hand turn out of the station, you go up the lift hill that kind of faces Shambhala's lift hill. At one point you pass under it. Once you get to the top, it's a straight drop, you turn to the right, then go down it, so there's some pretty strong floater on the way down. Drawing comparisons to Kumba, that's curved, so there's no real airtime on that, something I preferred on Dragon Con. It turns at the beginning and then drops straight down, like Demonin or Kraken, which is really nice on an inversion-focused ride. It has a pop or two of airtime, especially sustained on that drop. And after this is where the barrage of intensity really begins. This is the most intense B&M I've ridden. I've mentioned Kumba a few times, but I think it's more intense than Hulk, Kraken, and lots of others. This has a reputation for being one of the worst sit-downs, but it's definitely the best looper, sit-down or floorless I've ever done. So getting back to the layout, after you plunge down that drop, you head into a vertical loop. Just like a lot of other B&Ms, you start off with a loop, then a dive loop, then a zero-giro, cobra roll, mid-course, and then interlocking corkscrews. This is no exception, but what makes Dragon Con special is how fast it takes all these elements and how intense they are, and the loop is no exception. You really charge through it, featuring some great positive Gs, and almost every element on this is really a gray out. If not a gray out, it's got some really intense positives, like I mentioned. After the loop is a dive loop, which features some great whip and laterals on the way down. The valley is pretty intense, and then you head into the best element on the ride, and one of my favorite inversions in general, this zero G-roll, which absolutely whips you to the right. It's absolutely insane, more so than Kumba's or really any other zero G-roll on a B&M I've done. The whip and laterals are absolutely insane on this. It's definitely the best element on the ride. I love this inversion. After the zero G-roll is a cobra roll, and I've never really been a huge fan of cobra rolls. Kumba's kind of let me down. Kraken's wasn't as good. I did like Hulk's a lot, but yeah, Dragon Con's really isn't anything special. It's definitely intense, but one of the weaker moments on the ride. Still a good element though. You then rise up into the mid-course. There's no real pop of airtime here. And depending on how hard the mid-course hits, you can either take the next vertical loop with some hang time, if the mid-course really slows the train down. If it doesn't hit at all, which I certainly prefer, the following loop and interlocking corkscrews are really intense. The loop is kind of in a trench, and after you go through that, you turn into these interlocking corkscrews. I wasn't a fan of Kumba's. I liked Kraken's corkscrew, but Hulk's wasn't as good. Again, I'm drawing lots of comparisons to those because those are the similar rides I've ridden. Dragon Cons are pretty forceful and aren't that rough. There's definitely a little bit of a rattle, especially towards the end, but it's nothing as severe as something like Kumba. I definitely think that's one of Dragon Con's strong points is, unlike a lot of those other loopers, it's not as rough as some of those. So yeah, after those interlocking corkscrews, you rise up into the brake run. Dragon Con keeps its pace pretty well through the layout, depending on how hard that mid-course hits, like I mentioned. The second half definitely isn't as strong as the first, but it features some nice moments. It's definitely a first half ride like Shambhala. That combination of the first 3 elements really makes the ride. I know some people aren't a big fan of Dragon Con, But I rode this in December of 2021, and a lot of people have said that that's when it was running at its best, so be aware that my point of view might be a little higher on it than a lot of other people's. It's definitely one of my favorite B&Ms, and I don't think Shambhala deserves to completely overshadow it at all. I do prefer Shambhala overall, but they are definitely in the same league, so as a result I will be giving Dragon Con a 9 out of 10. That's actually the same score as Shambhala. I really enjoy Dragon Con and think that it should be talked about a lot more.